Okay, taking care of that. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. I do. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for answering in the chat. All right. So let me tell you a little bit of why I'm here. I love this saying, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I could be a tool of torture, absolutely, or an instrument of inspiration, of course. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, a child humanized or dehumanized. The reason why I do what I do as a teacher, the reason why I found myself as a teacher is because when I was in school, we didn't have universal screeners back then. We still don't have them in most schools today. If my teachers would have used a universal screener, they would have realized how much trauma I had in my life. I was fortunate enough to have teachers who knew that they were the decisive element in the classroom, and they made a difference in my life. There are a handful of teachers that were extraordinary and so inspirational, extreme protective factors in my life. And they did not look like me. They did not have lives like me. They did not have the trauma that I had, but they were a grounding force. And so the things that I'm going to present to you today, they are not new things. I think teachers have so many new things already, and so you choose what's new for you to add into your life. These are things that you already do. I'm just re-inviting you to continue to do them, perhaps do them more consistently, and maybe remember the why of why you started doing them in the first place. A little bit of housekeeping. This is what we're going to go over today. I've decided after I did the last presentation that we are going, I've made it briefer. So I know it may look like a lot, but it really isn't. And I've left some resources for you on the end. Expectations today, of course, if we were doing this in person, we would be more mindful, more curious, and more collaborative. But I understand you're in different spaces doing different things. So feel free to be you. Self-care is always most important. I'm very open. You can unmic if you'd like. I don't think anybody here is unruly. You can put things in the chat as you go. You can comment along with me, however you would like. Okay. Today, I'd like you to design your own outcomes based on what you read or the title or what I've shared so far. What do you want to know, learn, feel about today's session? It helps guide me in my presentation. And I'll give you a minute to do that. I'll give you 37 seconds. It's a hard ask on a Friday, I know. Wendy says she wants to learn new ways to recognize and appreciate each individual student and see them as they are while maintaining. Yes, absolutely, Wendy. I think you're going to find today that there aren't new ways. I think being you and being consistent is going to be the key. And if anybody has new ways and would like to share as we go along, absolutely, please put those into the chat. Thanks for stepping out of your box. Help all students feel welcome in my classroom. Yeah. So that's really what inclusion is all about, is how do you feel included? And the best way I like to think about it or create an analogy is when I come to your home, what do you do? Think about the hospitality that you provide when I come to your home. That applies to your classroom. And so when we're going through these three things today, I want you to think about that. And when I come to your house, do you make me feel included? Do you make me feel welcome? So when a student comes to your classroom, do you make them feel that way? Okay. And classroom management. Perfect, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that. If anybody else, I don't want to rush anybody, but just for the sake of time, I want to make sure you make your next session. If your intention comes up, and you would like to write it in the chat later, please feel free to do so. I will notice it. Just a brief overview of ISLA. That is just an abbreviation, and I don't want you to get hooked on the abbreviation. It's not fancy. It's not anything that you need to remember. It's just good stuff you already do. Okay. The reason why it is named ISLA is because they did research on it, and they have to, every person who does research on it has to name it something so they can get credit. The goals of this approach, these basic things, are to strengthen prevention in your classroom, to reduce the amount of missed instructional time, because I want to tell you that the time in your classroom is really precious, and I know that you all know that. And at the same time, taking care of kids is also really important. To improve behavior supports for students, to support skill development for the skills they do not possess, because if they did have them, they would probably use them in that environment. To improve student-teacher relationships and to reduce the use of exclusionary discipline practices. I'm not telling you to stop doing things, but you'll understand what exclusion means as the opposite of inclusion. The ISLA process does have steps to it, just to remember that. If you look at the how of the ISLA process, it begins with preventative classroom practices. This is grounded in PBIS, and you'll know that prevention is 80% of the game, and our response to things that go sideways are our interventions, right, and supports that we provide. And then in-class effective responses to behavior. I will touch a little bit on it, but I decided to cut the presentation short, just mainly to the prevention part today, because I was jamming for time the other day. So component number 1 is building relationships. And we've heard that, right? We've heard it so much, but nobody tells us really like how to build a relationship. And so I'm going to give you 3 strategies that are really the cornerstone of building the relationship. And if you can look at your classroom and really know that you're doing that with all the students, not just with some of the students, then you are really fulfilling this first step. So the 3 things that we're going to talk about is welcoming students at the door. And I know you're already thinking in your head, I can't do that in some cases, or I can't do it all the time. I got you. We'll talk about that a little bit. Owning your own environment. And so I think that's hard for a new teacher, but there are actual 3 ways where you can actually, like the concrete ways of the how of owning your own environment. And then the importance of wrapping up your class with intention. I know I was a teacher who was very high strung and tried to do a lot in a very small period of time. And I found that I often ran out of time to wrap up class with intention. But I'm going to let you know that it's super duper important. It would be if we went back to that example of me coming to your home, if you just stayed in the kitchen and told people, I'll see you later, but didn't walk them to the door, didn't walk them to the curb, didn't say thank you for coming, that would be an example. Okay, and then the second step are effective responses to behavior. And so effective in-class responses, these are effective ways to reteach the appropriate behavior, no matter how corny it feels. To request a change in behavior, you can ask, right? I would like to see. To invite the child to self-correct, meaning like, is there another way for you to be able to express yourself or for you to be able to do that? To partner the student with another student who's on task. I know we've done that. That's a common one. Provide assignment accommodations. How about you start with number 1? Teacher proximity. We do that. Sometimes we forget how important that is. Or we give them the eyes, right? The visual prompt. Or we tap the desk. There are other ones that you can do. Or to have a mini conference with a student in a way that does not shame them. Those are all effective in-class responses. Another effective in-class response that the ISLA process supports is having a break system for de-escalation. And it's very interesting because it's controversial when you first think about it as a teacher. Is like, why would I give the student an option to have a break? It's because even we need it. So I know even with your cameras off, you're going to take a break if you need it. You're going to go to the bathroom, you're going to attend to your kids, whatever it might be, and that's okay. A break system is needed because it helps us not escalate, and it helps reinforce and teach us that to recognize when our own behavior escalates, and that we need to be able to de-escalate ourselves, or that we have the ability to de-escalate other people. It will also help you identify students who need more supports. And I know you're going to know that on day one. You're going to look at a kid and you're going to think, you're on my radar, right? And so you wait a couple days and you see if that gets reinforced. It's going to be reinforced quickly. And then to reserve ISLA supports for students who truly need skill building. And so you want to make sure that you have effective responses so that the outside classroom supports are actually for the people who need it the most, because we only have so much capacity. If you wanted to read more, this is hot linked or hyperlinked, and you can go and check it out. It has more details there. So as I said, it's grounded in PBIS. Love this. Okay, so this is a really common experience. So you have two kids in the office, right? One that started a fire in a class and one who was tapping their pencil on their desk. We can think about this and we can argue it in so many ways, but what the comic is kind of putting into question is, should these two kids be out of class? That's one. When you take those kids out of class, what does that do to them? Are they still included? Does one really need to be in the office because they're dangerous? Does one need to remain included and then they need some sort of support or redirection on tapping their pencil on the desk? So that's the difference between, on this one, the pencil tapper as being classroom managed, and then this guy over here being office managed, or as you probably know, a minor and a major. And we like to look at things on the big deal-o-meter. So you can look at this and you can look at things and we can discuss where these things fall. But if you're in look and for yourself or for your site, decide where things go on the big deal-o-meter. And it's a really good calibration tool. I don't think I included it, but there is a picture of a school doing this where they wrote behaviors on little strips of paper, and then they calibrated as a staff in a staff meeting of where they thought things went. And that way they were all on the same page. So here is the link, right, with discipline. So exclusionary discipline leads to negative impacts. We also know that as the prison pipeline. So there's over 20 years of research, right? And we know that students who experience exclusion more definitively, those kids who receive out of school suspensions, but each behavior leads to a more progressive behavior. And so we are really trying to take care of those minor behaviors as much as possible. But it does lead to lower academic achievement, obviously, because they're going to be out of class more. Further discipline involvement, that's what I was telling you. And then potentially juvenile justice or adult justice involvement, right? And it's definitely a higher risk of being retained or dropping out. The ninth grade year is very, very, very crucial for that last statistic. So if you look at this as exclusionary discipline practices, what I love about this graphic is it shows you that all of these things are exclusionary, from an in-class timeout to a cross-class timeout to sitting in the hall to the reflection room. I will let you know that out-of-school suspensions are the ones that lead to most negative outcomes, but all of these result in a loss of academic learning time, and that's what is really important, especially for a kid who chronically misbehaves, so they've lost a lot of time in their previous, years and who needs to be there, needs to feel included in order to really engage. So did you know that most schools across the nation do use exclusionary practices that fall into the zero tolerance range? They do mandatory suspension. Mandatory suspension and expulsion do negatively affect a student's sense of belonging. And I know this to be true because you probably already know this to be true, because those are the kids in your classes who like come late, who say, I don't care. That is a big sign that they don't feel like they belong. They do not feel like a student. They do not feel valued. And that suspensions do not prevent unwanted behavior. And you know that to be true as well, because the kid gets suspended again, sometimes for the same thing, but sometimes for different things, right? So that does not prevent them. It only prevents the kids in the 80%. Okay, it deters. It does not stop them from doing it. We already know this to be true. You can read it later, but we know that students of color, students with disabilities, and students living in poverty or have low skills like can't read or beginning readers, they are at most risk of exclusion for sure, hands down. So here's where, for those of you who are high school teachers, a single out of school suspension in 9th grade is associated with a 50% increase in dropping out. Super duper true. A 19% decrease in enrollment in post-secondary education. That means academies, training schools, universities, you name it, because they don't feel like they can. These effects are not seen only for students receiving the exclusion, and that is true too, because every time something happens in your class, it does lower the academic achievement of all the students in your class. And then schools with high rates of out-of-school suspensions have lower school-wide achievement. That is true as well. Never rely on referral, suspension, or detentions to change behaviors. You're going to need instruction acknowledgement for those unwanted behaviors. So you're going to need to re-instruct the appropriate behavior, and then you're going to have ongoing acknowledgement when they demonstrate that ongoing behavior. So you have to figure out, or not the ongoing behavior, for the appropriate behavior. Sorry about that. And you can't punish skills into a kid. It just doesn't happen, because I firmly believe that if they could, they would. So here's a question for you. I want you to think about the current disciplinary approach that you're used to at your school or your previous school. But then I want you to think about more specifically a time when you experience exclusionary discipline in school yourself as a student, and how did that make you feel? And I'll put mine in the chat as well. Give you about 59 seconds for that. So Ashley was angry, but she never did it again. Yeah, you have the right to your feelings. Time and reflection away to recalibrate emotions. Absolutely. And that's very valuable. Angry, wanted to give up. Yeah. You do want to give up. And that's part of the ISLA approach too, is the reconnection and the restoration. That's in the 4th step. And so that I decided I'm going to break it into parts. The original training had it all in one, but it would need to be like a 3-hour session. They used to put my desk in the hallway. Yeah. And so you felt angry and misunderstood. Yeah, I didn't have it. Right? They just put you out there without listening to you. Being excluded made me feel embarrassed. Yeah, a shame. Shame is a root cause of lots of unwanted behaviors. Made me not do the behavior. Yeah, be self-aware. Yeah, self-awareness is one of the CASEL competencies. Unfair, got in trouble for running on the playground in kindergarten. Yeah. Shouldn't we be running in kindergarten? Oh my goodness, we need to get the wiggles out for sure. Just you have to teach you the right place and the right time, or to where you can do your running. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Okay, so these are chemicals that we want in our bodies, and we can get them, and students can get them in our classrooms as long as we're doing these things. And so the reward hormone, when you're acknowledging a kid, they're getting hits of dopamine When you're giving them agency, they're getting serotonin. When you show affection in appropriate ways, they're getting hits of oxytocin. And when they get the opportunity to move and be free, they are getting endorphins going through their body. It makes them feel good, and it does give them a sense of belonging indirectly. And we know the opposite is true. So we know the whole Maslow before you bloom thing, right? So stress gets in the way of learning. So like if you get into a car accident before you come to work, my goodness, how can you concentrate on what it is that you do? Hopefully you leverage your experience in order to focus, but it is terribly hard. And imagine a small person, they have smaller stresses, but they are just as big to them. This is to show you that ISLA does fall into the PBIS approach of having a system, right? Systems are adult facing. And so these are the things that you do in your classroom that are part of your structure. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, it's kind of like the invisible stuff, the way I'm watching The Bear right now. I don't know if anybody else has watched The Bear, but it's kind of like how you organize what it is that you do, your classroom management. And then practices are those things that actually are student facing. And so what actually do you do towards them? And the data, like whether it's formative data or summative data, what do you do with it? And then that together all creates a place that like fosters equity. So here's the ISLA model. And just to show you, there's a classroom component. There's a restorative component that I was telling you about that has to do with your intervention teams. And there is a team component that does use the data that you provide for decision making and outside of the classroom supports. And so you can kind of see that there's systems and that there's practices and that there's use of data and that ISLA supports equity. Here's the layered approach in regards to PBIS. You know that in Tier 1, ISLA has the in-classroom supports that are available to everybody, which is the things that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And that it also includes effective responses to unwanted behaviors. There's something called Tier 1 Plus, and that is where some of your sites are using out-of-class ISLA supports without punishment, where they're utilizing your wellness center, your counselors, your intervention team in order to support folks. That could also be your English learner specialist, ed specialist, okay? And then you have Tier 2 specialized group systems, right? That's based on data always. So when a kid falls into a specific data target, they would get an additional support, as well as if they need it, they could have a Tier 3 support if they find that they need something that's more individualized or intensive. Okay. Benefits for, I'm going to go through these quickly because I just want you to understand that ISLA does have studies out there. They have one for middle school, and they do training for teachers, training for paras, and training for admin. And they learn things from students, and you can kind of just see the different anecdotes from different kids. They feel like these are things you've heard a million times. Feel like there are some kids that get called out more. I feel that when a class is welcoming, it's easier to focus. This one teacher lets the kids talk about what happened over the weekend. Some teachers will give you a chance to stop or correct. Absolutely. They have compassion. When teachers admit they make mistakes, it calms you. So they like for you to struggle out loud, and that they would like teachers to listen more, right? Instead of just being dealt with. They also learn things from staff. So ISLA appears to take students' voices into account. I think our taking part in ISLA has made our students' performance change, because even though we've always worked through issues verbally with a student, we're now asking them to reconnect. And that's part of the restorative aspect. I like the ISLA idea, but I need more consistency with it. A lot of you are doing these things, and again, the consistency is key. We are able to have students reflect deeper and process what happened. And that's also important because they are often not self-aware. Because even in their homes, if they're expected to follow rules or expectations, oftentimes, with good parents, you discuss like what went through your head. Could you have made different choices? But we don't often have time for that in class. So when can we do that in class, and when is it needed to be done outside of class? There was another study, and it was very interesting because the impact of the 3 elements of the WOW alone showed positive an increase. You'll get to see that an increase in academic learning time and a decrease. So the control is red and ISLA training is blue. So if we're looking at the blue, there was an increase in engagement and a decrease in disruptive behavior. If we looked at the impact on teacher behavior after the training, the control group who didn't have any in the ISLA group, the only thing that was hardest to improve was wrapping up class with intention, because I think we're all well-intentioned, awesome teachers, but we get carried away and we forget the end of the class. And then the impact on office discipline referrals. When people are doing the training, they're very consistent, and we call that a honeymoon period. And so they have to do long-term studies to really see if that pans out over time. And the same thing with the impact on exclusion. There was a honeymoon period, right? It's going to stay up as long as people stay strong, as long as the adults stay strong. So as a result of those studies, they learned that exclusion alone, just alone, does not correct unwanted behaviors. You do need instruction. And building a system focused on teaching and reinforcing appropriate behaviors does, right? So it's not just the instruction part, but it's also the acknowledgement part. And we're not talking about bark bucks or tickets or wow cards. We're just talking about plain acknowledgement. Thank you for being respectful and following my direction the first time. And then teachers and students benefit from a system that maximizes the amount of time students spend in class. Absolutely support you on this. Okay, here we go. Supportive classrooms and positive relationships set the stage for effective instruction. We want to make sure that all that time that you spent in planning your instruction gets appreciated. Also, it helps with academic engagement, and so you don't spend any time managing disruptions. It also supports healthy development in the students, gives you a good sense of communication and collaboration in your classrooms. And it gives everyone, including you, a stronger sense of school belonging. So what makes the class a welcoming and supporting place? They said, I feel like if you had a teacher that is accepting and supportive, it's going to make you want to go to class more. Of course. Like, don't you want to go to somebody's house who makes you feel good? Another student said, and in turn, you're going to want to learn after that. Absolutely. So if they want me to go and help them weed their yard, I'm going to go help them weed their yard, right? Just like being around them. What do your teachers do to make classroom a welcoming place for all students? It's the creation of the community, right? Open, friendly, and it intertwines having a great environment and learning at the same time. What do your teachers do to make the classroom a welcoming place for all students? They're inclusive, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. That's just one way. When you have kids line up as boys and girls, what about the kid who doesn't identify as a boy, or the kid who doesn't identify as the girl? Where do they go? They have to pick one. That's just a very simple example. Here's the secret. Changing behaviors in our students is actually about changing our behavior and making our classrooms, hospitable, right? Good places to be. Okay, here's strategy number 1. And I'll go slower. Welcoming students at the door. Can you put in the chat, yes or no? How many of you have heard of First 5? Or you can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, First 5. So if you sign up for First 5, there's a link at the end of the slide deck that will allow you to sign up. I will let you know that the email comes every day in the morning, like at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's from like Doug Overton or something like that. So don't throw them away. But they email you a way to greet students at the door, a different way every day. And then also questions that you can use for warm-ups every single day, and they're timely. So if we're nearing a holiday, they match them to the holiday. So feel free to sign up later, or while I'm speaking, you can do that too, but just scroll to the end of the deck and I have it linked. And so that's one of the things, different ways to greet your students at the door if you don't know. But you know what? Just being there is great with a smile on your face. I remember seeing Toni Morrison speak, and I remember the opening question was something to do with children. And Toni Morrison said the best thing that you can do is to be happy to see them. And I have in my whole that was in high school when I heard her speak. And so I don't think I ever forgot that. So when you see children, no matter how you're feeling, no matter how they're feeling, like, be happy to see them. Different ways. You can say hello or good day or good afternoon, good morning in different languages. So many different ways. These are probably more conducive to middle school, right? Because we're cool in high school. But I've even seen high school teachers find their own kind of shtick at the door that's comfortable for them. Black Panther is another example, right? This one teacher, I think you've probably seen this before. He has his kids make a personalized handshake, their own handshake, and they teach it to him and he remembers it. Now, granted, he's an elementary school teacher and only has these students all day long. But if you had a smaller class, if you were an ed specialist and you had a group of students, you could do that. If you had a special class that you wanted to work on, you could do it just for that one class. And just more examples of greeting students at the door. Those are linked. Okay. Oh, for Spanish, I use a class password where students say a tongue twister in Spanish every day. Fantastic. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Jessica. Okay, so just research says that if you just welcome students at the door, that means just stand there, that you are going to increase engagement by 20% because they are going to know that you are ready. You are ready to teach, and they better be ready to learn. And that disruptive behavior went down 9%. I think that's because of the accountability, because if they behave naughty and you're waiting for them at the door, they're probably scared to death that you're going to say something to them. And you're not, because you're going to set a positive tone. And you're going to do that because you're going to promote a sense of belonging. And that over time is going to build trust. And it costs nothing. You don't have to buy Jolly Ranchers. You don't have to do tickets and give them prizes, nothing. So what did students say during the study? I feel that when a class is welcoming, it's easier to focus and not as stressful, unlike a class that isn't welcoming. I don't know. It's just a phenomenon, right? It makes a difference. It makes a difference that somebody is happy to see you and wants you to be there. This is what you have to do. Okay. It's really important, if you can, as many students as you can, to say their name. For PBIS, I do walkthroughs in the schools, and teachers are on their best behaviors when I do these walkthroughs. But I have to tell you, I don't hear enough students' names being called in positive ways. I do hear them say, like, Richard, put that down. Cynthia, eyes up here, right? But we need to use their names more often in positive ways. You need to make eye contact, and of course, being sensitive to people's cultures. Use a friendly nonverbal greeting, happy eyes, smile, however that might be your body language. Give a few words of encouragement if you can. Some days are going to be more rushed than others. And ask how their day is going if you have time. Okay. I mean, you can also really target the kids that you find that are starting to show unwanted behaviors and make sure you give them a little bit more of that time. Kindness is definitely contagious. Some different alternatives to handshakes, hugs, or high fives. I did see at least one teacher who does this. So instead of like asking them a question, they use a Post-it and they put it where they want to, and then you can kind of get the vibe for the day. I used to do 4 corners when I taught PE, and then I could see them where they were falling for the day. Okay, this was a hilarious example, but I had to include it. One teacher, he made his kids peanut butter and jelly sandwiches if they wanted one. Crazy, huh? So crazy. But, whatever your kids need, whatever that might be. Younger kids, doing a pinky promise or a pinky hello. And then you can also, in a staff meeting, this is where I make students feel welcome by and just be able to brainstorm different examples when you get stale. An ordinary handshake goes a long, long way. It's really tough for our kids who are used to misbehaving the most to shake your hand and look you in the eye because they haven't felt valued for so long. It feels they don't feel worthy. And so over time, you'll find that if you do shake their hands, they will respond to you better over time. So I'm going to give you an invitation to reframe. I know greeting kids at the door is hard. I know I was a teacher for a very long time. It is hard to do it every day, every period consistently. But here's the reframe. I can't greet students between every class period, but I can. So what can you do? Can you do it for some classes? Can you do it most periods? Can you do it when you're feeling great? Whatever it might be. It says, I can't learn all the kids' names immediately, but I can learn 5 kids in each class a day. I can use name tense. I can, whatever it might be. Okay. And I know that learning kids' names is really hard. I can try to the first week, especially since we're starting on a Monday this time, or a Tuesday. We're starting on a Tuesday and not on a Wednesday. You have a little bit more time to learn those names by that Friday. I know as you get older, it gets harder. I will tell you that. I didn't think it was really true, but it is really, really true. So on this chart, I want you to just go through this process and think along with me. So for welcoming students at the door, what's your comfort level, right? So think through that. What's your comfort level? And then what is the style or preference of your students, right? What class are you teaching? You could have an ASB class, you could have AVID, you could have ELD, you could have an elective class, it might be PE. So what's the preference for your students? And then think to this year, what can you do this year? And then what are the challenges or obstacles do you need to rearrange or change some of your systems, like how you do roll? What do you need to change? So if you think through this process, anytime you think through it, it's like setting a goal or setting intentions. And the more that you set intentions, the more likely you are to follow through. Ask their names at the door until you learn them. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so like they have to say their name until you can say their name. That would be really cool, right? And they're going to be so surprised when you say their name before they say their name. Okay. Wow, strategy number 2 is a little bit more elusive. How do you own your own classroom? 3 ways. You have to teach it, you have to model it, and you have to acknowledge it. And a funny example, right? So here's a no birds rule. And here's the bird sitting on top of the sign. And the bird obviously did not get the gist of the sign. So we often put rules up in our class. We don't teach them, we don't model them, and we don't acknowledge them. So kids don't follow them. It's really, really an important funny photo. So teach it, model it, acknowledge it. Everything that you want, teach it, model it, acknowledge it. You do that, you own the classroom. Students in classrooms where routines are taught are more engaged in academic activities because they don't have to wonder, right? They are not worried about what they're doing or not doing. They will disrupt instruction less because nothing is going to be questionable. And that results in improved progress and less time wasted. So what does it look like to own your classroom? What if we started focusing on what we can control, influence? And so let's answer that in the chat. What does it look like to own your classroom? What does it make you feel like? Put that, or unmic if you'd like to unmic. What does it feel like to own your own classroom? Guillermo says, when you own and encourage resilience and accountability, the students buy into it as well. They do. So you get that sense that they are part of the ship, right? So they are steering it just as much as you are. Absolutely. Anyone else? What do you feel like when you own your classroom? Respect for each other and have fun learning. Yeah, it's that intertwining, right? Of knowing that you belong and also knowing that you're there to learn. Yeah. And that people genuinely want to help each other for sure. But to me, it means increasing my students' confidence in their own learning. Yeah, having a learning-centered space where you're free to make mistakes because you know that you're always going to be accepted unconditionally. There's going to be a positive regard for everybody. Having an organized space, I do think being organized and having a neat and clean space kind of fosters peace for sure. And then it gets messy as you're doing work. I know that. It feels as though we are a team. Absolutely. It's that unification of purpose. It feels like there's flow. I love flow, right? If that flow feels effortless and you don't feel stressed at the end of the day, that is emotionally exhausting. It's the most emotionally exhausting part of our day is micromanaging things, not needing to remind students of classroom norms for sure. I mean, you're going to do a lot of that reminding in the beginning and a lot of acknowledging, but then it tapers off, hopefully. Yeah, mutual respect and fairness. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Okay. And when all else fails, be like a duck, right? Above the surface, you're going to look calm and unruffled. And under the surface, you can pedal like hell. Okay. And that it's really important for you to remain as regulated as possible. And if you have trouble staying regulated for whatever reason, there's no judgment. At the end of the slide deck, there's something called a neutralizing routine. It works for you. You can also co-create it with your students, but it's a regulation tool and you can use it for yourself. So when something triggers you, you go back to your neutralizing routine so that way you can effectively respond to students. You can also teach students how to use it so they can either de-escalate each other or they can de-escalate themselves. Amanda did share being flexible about the unexpected. Yeah, not freaking out, huh? For sure. Okay, just like the duck. So here, I'd like you to kind of think about this. When a student is struggling academically, what do we do? When we are struggling academically, we help them, right? Or when a kid is struggling academically, we help them. What do your students do when they're struggling academically? Hopefully, they ask for help, right? Yeah, hopefully. So when a student is struggling socially, what do you do? And what do your students do? When they're struggling emotionally, what do you do? What do your students do? When they're struggling behaviorally, what do you do? And what do your students do? And the response should be the same, right? It's just, do we have enough tools to do that? And that's where I'm a committed educator. So if there's any time you ever need a thought partner, you can always feel free to drop me a chat or call me, and I'm happy to help. So I have a question for you. Is there sufficient training for teachers on classroom management, establishing routines? I think more and more every day. Every generation that comes out of the ranks, I think, gets more and more training because they have to. The most effective teachers make it look effortless. They really do. Like, you wonder where the magic comes from, but it's not magic. It's just they've gotten it down to a science. In reality, it does take intention, planning, and work by the teachers. That's why we get paid, right? Here's just a couple things for you to look at later, just so you can see in our PBIS resources, when we do our walkthroughs, we're looking for predictable routines. And so this just gives you a tool to look at. It gives you critical features of what the classroom would look like, elementary and secondary examples and non-examples. I'm throwing these droppers away. We don't need any of this stuff, right? Guillermo, you have a question? Oh, thank you. Okay. And then on the next one, define and teach positive expectations. So your school has 3, 4 expectations, and we wonder how we use them in their classroom. Well, what we would like to see is if your school expectation is respectful, responsible, and ready to learn, we'd like to see your rules fall under there. So You would have respectful, responsible, and ready to learn up on your wall. But then what does it look like to be respectful in Miss Cabrera's room? What does it look like to be respectful in Miss Zamora's room? And then having those concrete behaviors underneath there so it doesn't leave anything up to chance. Okay. And so that's a resource for you to check out as well. So make sure you look at critical features and non-examples. This is a TikTok of a guy. A lot of us are getting advice from TikTok these days. I can't blame you. It's fun. But he did a way of setting goals or intentions with his kids, used 2 index cards. It's the snowball thing, you know, and the reason why he did it was because a kid would pick up a different snowball and read it out loud. And what he was trying to create is a sense of connection, letting them know that their goals are very similar. Okay, and also different, and setting the stage for that. So just little things. A new thing in this world is called co-creation. I think you've heard of it already. And so you can co-create your expectations in class. So if you really do expect students to use the agenda or some sort of tool like that, you can actually co-create an example and a non-example with them. And then they can, you can post that. I did a pilot study with students and I had them create their own. Oh my goodness, it blew my mind. But, you know, they followed the rules better of what things they really wanted, like concrete things. And I totally, like, I bought in hook, line, and sinker to their, they are good rule creators. And then you can also co-create expectations if you do collaborative group work. So whatever your group rules are, you can have them co-create the expectations with you. The more they co-create them, the more likely they are to follow them or to also modify them. So we do expect you to teach your expectations and your routines. Those are just some of them to think about, and then or to reflect on, and then think about how and when do you teach it? Do you teach it? Like, I don't know if I taught how or when to sharpen pencils. I think because I taught science, I would be like, please come with a mechanical pencil. And if you don't have one, I'll give you one. So we didn't waste any time sharpening pencils. So share in the chat. What is one routine you explicitly teach to students that you really feel works well in your class or setting? I was telling the other group that, gosh, I would love to have a list of these district-wide so that way we can call upon the ranks if we are weak in a routine and we want some advice from another coworker. So what's one routine you explicitly teach that you think you're really good at? Ooh, I like that. Location and supply of student materials. Okay, I love that. Picking up papers from a table when they enter. Absolutely. That saves you a lot and it keeps them from participating in unwanted behaviors. Attention getters. All right, I like that. Attention getters are fantastic. Call and response ones are really awesome. Getting started, walking in with greeting, going to the desk and taking out needed materials. Wow, nice. Just the ready to learn. You're doing the whole ready to learn sequence, Wendy. Jessica says taking out materials and starting a warm up when beginning class, that whole ready to learn phase. See how we do the ready to learn part, but the intention part is leaving with intention or closing with intention is really hard. Yeah, I totally get it. Oh, and you know, we're doing that because we want kids to be ready to learn. Absolutely. We're setting the stage for ourselves. I know for middle schools, the yonder pouches are coming. And so it's going to be really important for them to teach that. There's an advantage. Francis says showing needed materials on .cam visuals. Yeah, they do help. Yeah, I think they ground people in the direction. Like, I know if you tell me a direction, I'm like half listening, but if you show me, I'm right on. These yonder pouches are going to really need to be well taught in the beginning. It helps because it's going school wide. That really does help reinforce things. I will let you know that anytime you choose to take an expectation in your individual class and make it a school-wide expectation and you teach it school-wide, it becomes so much more powerful. And then you're going to have to model it. A responsibility is set an example and practice what we preach. So especially in middle school, how are we going to do that with cell phones, right? Are we going to use cell phones while we're expecting kids to to put them away. And then if we do use our cell phone because we're using it for educational purposes, how do we explain that to them? Estella says, daily bell ringer with a follow-up whip around to share responses gives me time to take roll. Absolutely. And bonus, I get to hear students. Yeah, you do. You want them to talk as much as possible. We want to hear students talking in class. Model it. For many students, you may be one of the most positive role models in their lives. Maybe. I know you are. So I will tell you, you are. Students think you are like it for real. When I used to teach yearbook, and I will have to tell you that you would think there are two things when they open the yearbook that they look for. Of course, they look for their picture first, and then they look for their teacher's picture right after that. And so you're so important to them. I don't know how many times I could tell you that. So please, if you expect something, teach it and model it. Okay. Anything here that I would like to, just it gives you some data to back that up, right? Modeling influences the student's motivation. It does. Like, I don't know why, but it does. Like, I think it gives them confidence that they can do it. It's kind of like if somebody shows me how to put in gas in my car, which I hate doing, then, and they model it and that it's easy and that I can do it without stressing out, then I'm more likely to do it, right? Yeah, improve social competence and adaptability. For sure. It allows them to ask questions because if they don't think they can do it in a certain way, then they're going to raise their hand. So we're doing a lot of, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. It's Wendy. When you have a moment, would you read and respond to my question in the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Thank
Thank you. What's an appropriate response for a student who will not put away their cell phone? I think you're going to be deciding that, Wendy. So I think that, right. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. So what's an appropriate non-excluding response? I think you always assume positive intentions, like even if they don't have positive intentions, right? Like, so you're going to say like, hey, just a reminder to put your phone away, right? So that would be a positive. You're just reminding them and then they don't put it away. Is there something that's happening? Like what can I do to support you in this moment so we can move forward? So I think that that's really, I think, Wendy, imagine it's the same thing. Imagine somebody coming to visit you at your house, right? And properly, you stop what you're doing to visit with them, but they don't put their phone away. It's going to take many students a lot of it. Absolutely is. And I think that's really the advantage of it going school wide and doing the yonder pouches initially. It's going to break the addiction because I don't even think that they know that they have their phone in their hand anymore. It's like glued to it. Right. And then I think everybody thinks that they can do two things at once. They can look at their phone and scroll and listen at the same time. And some can, but some can't. And then it does. It causes less engagement. Someone did that. I know that. Isn't that interesting? But you can stop the conversation. You can. And they will put it away. It's just how patient are you willing to be? Yeah, they will. And the other kids will actually pipe in and tell them, do not forget whatever you do. So if that kid, Wendy, doesn't put their phone away, but the next day they don't have it, use every single opportunity to acknowledge it. So anytime, like when they put it away that first time, like, they're reluctant. Maybe the first day they don't do it and they keep it out just to spite you. But the next day you say it and maybe it takes 5 reminders and then they put it away. You have to acknowledge that, like that you love that they acknowledged it, right? Like that they're getting it. So you have to look at the increments that they're getting there. They're getting there. They're getting there. So point out what they're doing right. Research indicates that you can improve behavior by 80% just by pointing out what someone is doing right. Okay. And I'm going to go quickly through. There is a magic ratio. I will let you know it's 5-to-1. So particularly with students that you are garnering your attention, you really need to focus on catching them in good things 5 times before you do a really harsh correction. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're specific. This one doesn't play for me. So owning your own classroom, teach it, model it, acknowledge it, Okay, so think about what's your style of teaching? What's the preference of your students? Is it short? Is it brief? Do you need to make sure you have visuals for it on your walls? Do you need to remind them of it gently? And what are you willing to do this year? And what do you need to change to make that happen? Or, what do you need to change? Okay, last one. I know I'm at 11 o'clock, right? Is the next session at 11 or 11:15? Oh, 11:15. Okay, so let me wrap up really quickly. So wrapping up with intention. See, I told you it's the one we always blow, right? Here are the benefits. Building relationships, creating community in class, develops a predictable routine, and teachers can use to assess learning. It allows for equity of voice because you're wrapping up and you're all present in that time. It's not just about you. Different predictable routines. Some of you may use an exit ticket. I know you don't use a closing circle, but some of you might use one for the week. Okay. Non-examples are leaving at random times and the teacher yelling goodbye, which I'm not going to do today, I promise you. We do foster a sense of community. It does reinforce social emotional learning by being able to identify how we feel in the moment just by listening, practicing stress management, slowing things down, right? Okay, what it might look like. So different ways of what it might look like, right? So this one teacher, he gets up on a ladder. Nice. Okay. Exit ticket examples, wrapping up the class with intention, having an effective, quick, efficient routine, developing and teaching the kids the routine, and deciding how to communicate, right? So how are you going to signal that it's time to close? So I'm going to invite you again to reframe. I can't do a closing circle with every class, period, but I can. What can you do? And then I teach in the choir room, computer room, which is the smallest classroom ever. This will never work. I can't have the students stand in a circle, but I can, right? So again, what's your style? What's the preference of your students? What can you do this year to be sure? Like I would personally tape a Post-it. If this is the one thing that I did not do consistently, I would tape it to where, to my, like the area where I present or speak from. And I would put tally marks on it when I would miss it. I did want to show you a video. This is my—
As a kid, I mastered the—
Okay, so this is my closing, and then I have a last question, and that's it. And I will give you the feedback while I'm playing the video. Okay, this is it. Oh, that made me mad. Here we go.
As a kid, I mastered the art of getting kicked out of foster homes. And the fact of the matter is I trusted no one. And looking back, I guess how could I? From the time my parents left me, to the time another foster kid raped me, to the time I was bullied so bad, I tried to kill myself with a bottle of pills. So I'm sitting in the van, in the driveway of this next home, preparing to meet Rodney and Christine from Yukon, Oklahoma. He looks in my eyes and says, "Son, you can keep causing problems. You can keep trying to mess up. You can keep pushing us away. You can keep trying to get us to kick you out of here, but you've got to get it through your thick head, son. We don't see you as a problem. We see you as an opportunity." You see, every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. March 2015, Harvard's National Scientific Council on the Developing Child released this study saying, and I quote, "Every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult." My friend and mentor, Reggie Joyner from Atlanta, taught me to think about it this way. In this jar are 936 marbles. Each one of these marbles represents a single week from the birth of a kid until that kid turns 18 years old. You know, a 16-year-old, you got 104 marbles remaining. Right here, we are looking at time. In fact, you're looking at all the time or all of the weeks you have left to influence this kid, or this kid before they turn 18 and begin making critical life decisions without your presence. What matters isn't how much time you have left with a particular kid that you care about. What matters is what you do with that time left. I mean, consider how many weeks Rodney had left when he bailed me out of jail. 26. I was 6 months away from graduating high school. 26 weeks to get through my thick head, my bitterness, my anger, my distrust of adults, to get me to finally accept help. You see, it's not about how much time you have left with that kid you're thinking of. What matters is what we do with that time. If every kid truly is one caring adult, one Rodney away from being a success story, then the challenge is this. The difference between a statistic and a success story is you.
So I will leave it there. I put a question in the chat, a closing question. How will you use your 36 marbles this year? I hope that you have a wonderful school year, and I invite you to reach out to me by chat, by email, by my phone number, which is extension 1409. No. Oh, are the charts for us to fill out available? No, but I can link that to the slide for sure. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate all the work that you do in getting to know your students. It makes a huge difference. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joseph, Rwanda, Guillermo, Daniel, my student, Ana, Maria Luz, Gamaliel. I need you to pronounce that name for me so I don't say it wrong. Wendy, Rose, Francis, bye, Francis, and Shada. Ooh, beautiful names. Hey, Daniel or Nick, can I help you answer any questions? Perfect. Thanks, Nick, for doing that. I appreciate it. Oh, absolutely. You're like an overachieving student, the last to leave, right? You're welcome. Yeah, that was usually good to know. I think teachers kind of fall into that category, right? First to class, last to leave. Yeah, have a wonderful weekend. Daniel, any questions for me? Bye, Daniel.